here. So thank you all so much for coming. I think it's going to be a fun and interesting morning to hear from the voices from our community. The way it's going to work today is everybody will read their poems or their offering, and then we'll just take questions at the end, just in the interest of time. So without further ado, Mike Doan is going to start us off with a piece that he had previously, I believe, written for the listserv. Mike, take it away.
Okay. I call this Trouble in Dixie, which is would grab your attention, I think, as a title. And I did put it on the listserv some time ago. I guess my conflict over religion in the South was inevitable. In the many years we have been coming to South Boston, Virginia, we have pretty much avoided discussing religious or political beliefs. I had one run-in during the week of Trump's inauguration with a preacher who called evolution a hoax in the sermon. But we aired out our differences and in fact are good friends now. This time I went to a prayer breakfast of many denominations sponsored by the local Baptist church. It started off wonderfully and I mixed in well with the others, including some I already knew. I even led off the sharing about being grateful to be alive and healthy at age 81. But then a retired pastor came up with the idea of promoting prayer and teaching the Bible in public schools. He wanted to talk to a local principal about letting us go in and start a prayer group or something. Another retired pastor seconded the idea. Before it could go much further, I announced that I really enjoy the group, but I am opposed to prayer and Bible teaching in public schools. I would have to leave the group if this idea continued. It sucked the air out of the room. But rather than argue with me, they pursued the idea instead of promoting prayer in a private school, which probably already had that prayer. And in their own preschool, they liked the idea too, and their after-school program. But that was a religious program pretty much anyway. The director thanked me for expressing my reservations. I mean, I'm not an interloper here. I have sung 5 solos in their church, and I've been in maybe 8 lengthy choral performances. Many of them read my weekly newspaper column. Once I even plugged the church in the column, and they seem to really like that. My wife grew up with several of these members herself. After a retired state senator, a rare Democrat, asked me about my reasoning, it occurred to me that many of the people in the group may not have heard another side of this before. I just said that many families who are not believers do not want their children indoctrinated in a religion. There are Jews and even Chinese now in this community. In fact, I don't think it would even be legal anyway. Then he added something I had never thought of. And I suppose, he said that to me, and I suppose that if there was a Muslim majority in some area, we would not want them teaching our kids to follow Muhammad. Well, yeah, all right. I think this turned out all right. I still go back to their meetings. And that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And we'll, and also in addition to holding questions, we'll just hold our applause till the end too, so we can give a big thanks to everybody. But thank you, Mike. That was very interesting. And I guess I like the idea that it's sort of personal empowerment, right? You could have a voice and share that and people would acknowledge it if it means something. Thank you so much. Next up is Pam Constable. I think needs no introduction here. Pam has got 2 poems she's going to read in there in your handout, and I think they'll be up on the screen.
Thank you so much.
If the choir is coming down right now, Shirley, should Pam wait? Okay. Oh, this is choir, yes.
Pam, you do your introduction of yourself, however, before.
Okay. Well, I think most of you think of me as a journalist who writes 2 stories, and also as someone who privately helps to rescue dogs, stray dogs. But I don't think you had any reason to know, except Roger, that I like to write poetry and that my true love in life is much wider than dogs. It's all animals. I love nature. I love animals. I'm so glad I moved out to the countryside, even though it's farther. I am with animals and surrounded by them all the time. Unfortunately, that's often in a situation that is sad rather than happy. But it was Roger who introduced me to Mary Oliver, who has become my muse in these years. So thank you, Roger. So I've got 2 poems to read, and whenever it's time, I'll do it.
No mic for her. No mic. Please project.
Speak up, project.
Yes.
So the first one is called The Stag. It was morning, just before 6, when I glimpsed him in the half-light of the fading moon. So motionless, I thought he was a tree. But then the branches moved and curled into the antlers of a magnificent stag, young and strong. We regarded each other for a moment, lost in time, in the forests of history. Then he heard a sound I could not, raised his noble head, leaped and fell, hooves scrabbling in the early frost, found his footing, and raced off in a powerful surge between the woods and the road. Cars approached and slowed to a stop, out of respect, or perhaps in awe, like me. But it was early yet. He still had time. The fast traffic was not yet bearing down. The hunters had not yet spotted his opulent crown of thorns. As he bounded along the border between man and nature, my fierce prayer followed until I lost him in the thickets, my heart breaking for all of us. A lot of stuff going on around here.
Well, you can wait till Howard and
Anderson.
Barbie find their seats.
Still not having.
Really?
Yeah.
Too bad there's no mic there.
Sorry, you talk down.
I'm trying. Okay, so this
Would it help if she moved closer? Yeah, why don't you move closer to what? To the, right to that red light.
okay. All right.
It's not gonna help so much with people here, but can be facing them.
All right. So is this okay?
And still speak loud.
Okay. So this is called The Gift. The turtle's head poked out from the grass as he started across the road. I swerved and braked, but a man behind me roared past, his horn blaring. The tiny body lay crushed, the shell scattered like a mosaic on the pavement. I knelt down, peering closely. The exposed muscles glistened in delicate filaments of color, the peach of O'Keeffe's hills, the lilac of Monet's haystacks. What a small, perfect miracle God had created, I thought. What a terrible privilege to behold it now. The turtle could not move. His beak opened and closed, silently pleading. I wanted to chase after the man in his powerful car to show him what he had done, but I had a sad, solitary duty to perform. Carefully, I backed my car over the dying turtle, then placed the fragile remnants in a towel and drove them home to bury them. I cursed the driver. I cursed the modern world of hurtling machines, of men too self-important to slow down, even on a quiet Sunday morning. But then, a few weeks later, I was on the same road. I passed a marshy pond, and I saw another box turtle peeping out of the reeds. I pulled into the next driveway, and a man came out, frowning slightly. I told him why I had stopped, and his face lit up. "Oh, yes, we help them all the time," he said. "You'll have to drop him over the pond fence. Please be careful so he doesn't fall on his back and get stuck." My faith in humanity was restored. I promised him I would. "Thank you so much," he said.
Thank you, Pam, for that. I have to say, I just, having read these ahead of time, just cringe every time I hear that part about having to back up and kill run over the turtle. It's chilling, but thank you.
It's, it's.
Hey, Matt,
What we do.
you up?
I guess not. But
Your
anyway.
dad's gonna read a poem shortly.
For those of you who have just come in, we're hearing the poems one by one. We'll take comments and questions at the end, just in the interest of time and everything. So I hope Matt gets up so we can hear his, his father and with reading his poem. So John, if you'll take the hot seat here. You all of course know John Firsching. John told me ahead of time, he has one poem which is printed and will be up on the screen share. And then he has another poem that he had previously shared with us, but he's just going to read that separately, and it's not included in any of your materials. So John, take it away.
Life at the minimum. The sun rises. The sky is blue. The sky is cloudy. The sky is weeping, sobbing heavily. I awake. You awake. They awake. I hunger. You hunger. They hunger. I thirst. You thirst. They thirst. I dress. You dress. They dress. I, you, they go out under the sky. I see that. You see that. They see that. And we all want. Sometimes we share. Sometimes we compete. And sometimes we cooperate. Win-win. Win-lose. Lose-lose. Sometimes we can't tell the difference. I see it one way. You see it one way. They see it one way. We meet. We clash. We reconcile. Maybe. I yearn. You yearn. They yearn. And we all see that over there. Sometimes we share. Sometimes we compete. And sometimes we cooperate. I exult. You exult. They exult. And yet, we're not always happy. I am afraid. You are afraid. They are afraid. We meet. We clash. We remain divided. I sing. You sing. They sing. But what does our singing do? I disappoint. You disappoint. They disappoint. Who is to blame? I laugh. You laugh. They laugh. At what? I smile. You smile. They smile. We smile. Why? I love. You love. They love. But whom? I yell. You yell. They yell. But why? Who am I? Who are you? Who are they? Who are we? Rhythms in the drumbeat of life. That was the minimum of life and minimum style. This is a more specific reflection. A lifetime reflection. A moment, right now in the instant, in the moment of a day, an hour, a week, a month, a year, right now, the many right nows. A smell, a sound, the taste, touch, and sight that comes from the many right nows throughout my time, throughout our times. A roaring fire, grilling food, providing warmth against the cold, against the night, against the fear, the sound of laughter, the melody of song, the taste of cold, clear water, the juicy sweetness of a berry, the touch of wind against my cheek, the breath of someone close, the mountain ridge in the distance, evergreen trees close by. We stand on the edge of a vista, the briskness washing over us. No motivation to move out of the all. Moments shared willy-nilly among friends, family, and strangers, caught in the rush of life, on time, late, off the rails, in ecstasy and rapture, disoriented and lost. The moments mount, crashing against each other in the crests and troughs of life. We are threatened, unfulfilled, snug, and secure, rating each other in what we've done, what I've done. What have I done? I have learned. I have caught the scent, the sound, the taste, and the touch and sight of the life around me. In the bittersweet, frightening times, I have seen the humanity in all the clashing sides, and I have striven to accept what is within and without. All of this I have achieved. And yet, oh God, why have you forsaken me? Millions of others seem to ask. Really? God the steadfast forsake me? Is that possible? How hard must I work to remember that God is present within me? A temporary visit? Possible abandonment at present if? Nah, seems backward to me. Too much needs explaining. Now, what if actually I am in God, trapped in the changing embrace, to feel the flow of creation, knowing that I am alive, that I am held in God, born into God. God cannot forsake me, but I can. No, not to be thought of. This truth is what I have achieved through the flow of creation, in, around, through me. Much more fact to feed this faith, arrived at in the many right nows of my life. When I take the moment to admire and smell the flowers, when I stop to smell the coffee, you know, that liquid in your cup.
Wow, thank you, John. Well, we're about halfway through our program. And even though I had said, oh, we'll just wait and take comments at the end, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm feeling like I need to take a little breath and just kind of take in the offerings that we have had so far. With that in mind, if you have a comment or some question that you'd like to pose to John or Pam or Mike is online, let's take a few minutes to do that. I guess I can start us off and just say one of the things I feel like they sort of have, even though each one, you know, is so different, what they have in common for me was kind of a level of specificity, right? That I was just really just drawn in to the story, both of Mike and of Pam's, and then of John's, I don't know, sort of philosophy of leading us into thinking about life and our connection. Is there anybody else that has anything they'd like to offer at this time?
We'd like the person to come front.
Okay, all right. Okay. Well, as I said, it's a lot to take in, but certainly thank everybody for their contribution. Elaine is up next. Elaine has two poems, and I think of Elaine as our naturalist, our resident naturalist. And so I'll turn it over to you, Elaine.
We have three.
Oh, three, go ahead, sorry.
I have two.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get that. Oh, okay.
Two.
Oh,
Oh,
Elaine.
Okay.
But use your biggest, use your outside.
I'll try. My first poem is called Morning Meditation. And if you'll wait just a moment, please. I'm sorry. So I can get it up on the screen. I'm sorry. Morning meditation. Black trees emerge from their tangle with the night, saying farewell to the stars. Bare limbs reach toward the gray blue sky like vessels carrying blood, like tributaries flowing into the sea. Soon there is a pink glow in the sky, banding the sky in pale blue, pink, then blue. The day grows brighter. A slight breeze waves a few brown leaves, as if they were brittle hands. More light, and the pink band shifts slowly downward, trees stalwart against the gradually brightening sky. Gulls traverse the sky, their breasts turn coral. The world is basking in the glow of an invisible orange fire that lights trees on the horizon, illuminates the pine, creeping down the trunk like an animal, slipping over loose bark past a long drip of resin, frozen in mid-flow. And the day becomes day, and the light is of that day, and the slowly revolving sky pivots from darkness into light, which is the promise of day. Next poem is called Safety. Black safety shoes, I stood on the steel toes when we danced. They rest empty in Dad's closet, missing his feet, the making of that steady, plodding step. Left on the bumper of my car, they rode with me to work, unscathed, like glorious leather hood ornaments bearing big industrial souls. Maybe they sang with the wind, enduring potholes and grime, those gravity shoes that held him to earth, the champion of hurdles and the old soft shoe, the T-berry shuffle down the aisle at my wedding. And then the last one is called An Evening Paddle on the Patuxent River. In twilight, the glossy water turns gold. Our paddles dip quietly, holes scrape the rasping defiant stems, shaking dried mud and senescent foliage. 3 great blue herons glide across my bow, floating low over the marsh toward their evening perch. White apparitions appear in trees ahead. Great egrets come to roost. A fingernail moon shines down and up from the river. The red surface of Mars glows in the west. Stars like pinholes dotting the firmament would guide us if we asked. And so it has been for 100 centuries. When natives gliding through the arrowhead and spattered off saw the same moon reflected in the river. Tonight, as we visit their realm, we receive the blessing of this life-giving place.
Wow. It is hard to hold back our applause, isn't it, after each person has read, but gosh, are we blessed to have such wonderful creative people in our community. Roger is up next, and this is going to be really an interesting tour de force, I think.
No.
Well, let's see, you want to see?
Oh, yeah, I'll
Roger?
sit.
Yeah.
Okay, well, big crowd. Like that.
There is, yes.
Yes, this has its origin in a conversation Nancy and I had before adult ed one time recently, and she suggested I write a poem about it or something about it. She thought it was an interesting topic, and the topic was the word queer and how it's changed its meaning so radically, and how I'm uncomfortable with it, because I remember when it was like the N-word or faggot or all of those awful words. So anyway, I wrote and kept throwing things away, and then decided, okay, I'm just going to write a poem and maybe it'll introduce some discussion. So here it is. Earthling like you.
Okay, here we go.
I didn't ask to be born. I don't think you did either. And yet, here we are on a planet spinning around a star in a vast universe. Before I had a name, I was just a brand new earthling. No labels yet beyond baby boy. Then came my name, Roger. And now at 80, I'm still Roger, but on the journey, I acquired a lot of labels that sometimes cover up that name. Some are labels that I like: son, brother, uncle, friend. Others are problematic. Words like gay and queer, for instance, used politically for walls of safety and chances for power, while sometimes simplifying me beyond recognition. Let us think of ourselves as earthlings for just a bit. Human relatives with names and multifaceted qualities, identities, far beyond our sexual differences. Call me earthling, call me Roger.
Thank you.
Can I do this?
Go ahead, please.
Well, I know a lot of you have very big concerns, as I do, about artificial intelligence, but I was introduced to it by Carl Georgi, and gave me a link, and I got on ChatGPT, and it's very easy. I just ask it to do something, and then cut and pasted this poem into it, and ask it to write a stand-up comedy routine. So here this is. Back. Hey folks, how's everyone doing tonight? I've got a little something different for you tonight. I'm going to do a stand-up routine based on a poem called Earthling Like You by Roger Gilkeson. Now this poem starts off pretty heavy, talking about how we didn't ask to be born. And you know what? That's true. I mean, who among us asked to be born? Anyone? Yeah, that's what I thought. But here we are on this little planet, spinning around a star in a vast universe. It's kind of trippy when you think of it. The poem also talks about labels and how they can cover up who we really are. Let me tell you, I know a thing or two about labels. I mean, I'm a comedian, which means I get labeled all the time. Sometimes it's funny guy, sometimes it's joker, sometimes it's just idiot. But you know what? I'm also a son, a brother, an uncle, and a friend. And these labels are just as important, if not more so. But the poem also talks about labels that are problematic, like gay and queer. You know what? As a straight guy, I can't really speak to that. But I will say this, labels can be helpful in creating safe spaces, giving people a sense of community, but they can also be limiting, and sometimes they can simplify people beyond recognition. So what's the solution? Well, the poem suggests thinking of ourselves as earthlings for a bit. And I gotta say, I kind of like that idea. We're all just human relatives with names and multifaceted identities. And yeah, we might have different sexual orientations or gender identities, but at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make our way in the world. So call me earthling, call me Roger, call me funny guy if you want, but let's not get too caught up in labels. Let's remember that we're all just spinning around on this little planet together. And if we can find some common ground, maybe we can make a little more make it a little more enjoyable for everyone. Thank you and good night.
Well, earthlings all, yeah, thank you, Roger, for that.
Be clear that we're cheering for Roger and not for Chachi.
Yeah. Well,
The
we
content-
have that exposure,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We're going to do something of joys and concerns about AI, and I thought that was a joy.
Okay, all right, okay, very good. Well, then it's gonna be a hard act to follow, but I am gonna follow it. So I have two poems. The first one, I didn't have a title for it, but this is the first poem.
And if you'll wait just a moment.
Oh, sure. Well, Paul, open.
I'm sorry, it just my boss get the right way, so I'll just leave it on the screen so you can go ahead.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, so this is the first one. John Updike died January 2009. Poet, novelist, essayist, critic. I last saw him in a lecture wearing Christmas red socks, castle loafers, and a navy blue crew neck sweater. How he read from an early New Yorker piece, hands conducting the words, slipping on splintering breath, snow showering Mountain Ridge. My mother never read Updike, knew nothing of the New Yorker. She put her feet up to the Reader's Digest, Zane Grey, and Agatha Christie, fodder enough for her. She prayed every day, trusted the Bible, although I never saw her fingers linger. Pencil at the ready, her hands worked the Sunday crossword, change diapers, bathe babies, hands splashing in the bath. And my second poem is called Lamentation. Through a glass darkly, I see enslaved names on crumbling fieldstone, braids soaked in blood, spilled from bare chests and brave backs, locks soaked in blood, air freshener spreading freshness in air long stale, stairs blank, blood everywhere, a sneaker missing a foot, earbuds dangling, ears hearing nothing, t-shirts baked with bearded faces, no longer crying mama, mamas wailing, my baby, my baby, my baby, my baby, my baby. George, Brianna, Michael, Modesto, Adam, Eric, Sam, AJ, Makahia, Freddie, Betty, Vinny, Marcella, Philandro, Deborah, Richard, Charlena, Doante, Amantic, Tamir, Carlos, David, Sandra, Sinzaze, Dante, Pearl, Alvin, Jalen, Ruth, Tony, baby. Is sorrow the end of sorrow? How much shame is enough? Abide with me, weak as I am. Let's see, Pam, you said you had one more?
I do.
Okay, why don't we'll end with Pam's poem.
It's not on I don't think it's there anywhere. I just brought it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just move up here, please. I will, I do not want to step up. It's also sad, so it'll bring back a little more melancholy from what was.
Okay, let's make.
Just stand here.
Yeah, but move closer to the mic. So
Okay. So this okay again?
Perfect.
How's this? Okay, this one is called The Sentinel. It's another sad one. Because I'm sad about nature. He was standing motionless on a sloping wooded hill, a Canada goose, tall and regal. He didn't move when I stopped. He was keeping watch. I knew he should not be alone, and I wondered where his flock had gone. Then I saw the crushed heap of black and gray feathers next to the road, a smaller goose, her long neck broken. He was a widower then, trying to understand what had happened to his mate, knowing somehow that soon he would have to leave her behind and rejoin a traveling formation of his kind. I carried her body a little way into the woods, thinking it a safer place for him to mourn. He flew off for a moment, then returned to his vigil. I wondered how many thousands of miles this pair had traveled together in their lofty migrations, how many goslings they had hatched and fed and seen off the nest. I wondered what it meant for a wild goose to miss someone, to mourn a mate, to face the violent loss of a companion, to be unable to stop mysterious forces with which he could not compete. I wished I could have comforted him. As I drove on slowly and lost sight of him around a bend, the Canada was still standing in that spot. I had a long way to go. The late afternoon shadows were deepening. I wondered how much longer he would wait.
Great, thank you. Well, let's have a big round of applause for all that. Thank you.